フィンチ家の奇妙な屋敷で起きたことを続き始めていきましょうか。よし、登っていきましょ
Mom definitely blamed Edie, but I think Lewis blamed himself. After he graduated, he just spent more and more time in his room. Until Mom got him a job at the cannery.
う。ここがルイスの部屋と。
Everyone always told me to stay out of Lewis's room. Except Lewis.
うん。よいしょ。行きましょうか。お、ボートの形してるのかこれ。おお、すごいね。ほいと。よいしょ。よし。
Lewis's room smelled very, very familiar. That part of him lived on.
Dear Mrs. Finch, as Lewis's psychiatrist, I can understand your desire for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse. Newly sober, I believe Lewis first noticed the monotony of his daily life.
おお、なんか始まっちゃいました。
He kept working at the cannery, but he withdrew part of himself.
え？
In our sessions, I saw the same behavior. His mind began to wander. I asked him to describe it. He said he started small, imagining a labyrinth. He'd feel his way about. Then something moved. Bats.
大盛り。おお。
And toads.
着替える？
And things that have not names. He knew it was all in his head. But he took it very seriously. I had hoped he'd find himself. But he found something more.
以上のもの。なんじ
I
ゃ？
worried about him then. Daydreaming at the cannery. I spoke with his boss. But he said Lewis had become a model employee. Methodical, tireless, focused. Like a whole new Lewis. So I let him go on. I even encouraged him. It seemed very promising at first. He told me he'd made a new friend. On the edge of a city he named Lewis Topi. He built the city up slowly, brick by brick. Then he made musicians. And songs for them to play. He talked about starting a band. And he was always humming something. Every day his imagination grew stronger. He no longer spoke at the cannery. But his chopping was as reliable as ever. Then one day it struck him that all the cheering crowds, even the stones under his feet, were all in his imagination, so he could do whatever he wished. He held an election for mayor. And he won. They begged him to stay, but his mind was already wandering. It became a game for him.
船に乗った。すげえ。
He'd conquer a city, then immediately push on.
おあ
New Louisville.
ニュールイスビル。ルイス。セ
St. Louis.
ントルイス。
He started drifting away from our reality.
あどんどんどこまで行くんや。
Minneapolis.
あらら、ルイス。
Until one day he forgot to go home from the cannery.
え
Even as his mother pleaded with him, part of Louis kept sailing on.
なんとまだ続くんだ。
In Louisburg, he heard rumors of a
威厳のある女王のこと。
handsome queen.
おカラフル。ババババババババ、なんじゃこりゃ。いやーじゃあこりゃ。
The queen was on her own quest for
自ら冒険に出かけ、光り輝く虹を探しているという。
radiant rainbows.
よし。道はどこや。お来た。イェーイ。お振っていきましょう。やったー。イェーイ。おっ
He
しゃ。
followed the sound of her
ハープをたどった。
silver harp.
よし。イェーイ。
His chase led him to a golden palace east of the sun and west of the moon.
お
Even then, his logic remained sound. He knew the world was all in his imagination.
これが女王か。えい。どこまで行っちゃうの。ふい
But he was so proud of having created it.
ふい。おお、やった。
In his own eyes, he'd become something greater than a king.
イェーイ。 よし。
For
行きましょう
someone
か。
who'd never known success in the real world, I think it was overwhelming. And then it struck him that the real Lewis was not the one chopping salmon, but the one climbing the steps of a golden palace.
ちょっともうあれか、妄想と現実が区別つかなくなって、もう妄想が現実やと。
My imagination is as real as my body, he told me.
あ
It
ら
was
らら
hard to
ら
argue with him.
あ、だんだんもう完全に取り込まれて、あ、ここは現実か。
He began to forget the world we know.
この世界を忘れ始めました。あ、ここは工場。
I think it pained him to remember Lewis, the cannery worker.
ルイスか。ことはもうこれは現実ではなく、想像。
He began to despise the man with a royal contempt.
これがルイスと。怒った。
I still thought I could save him.
行くんだ。
Even after he said he was being crowned king over all the lands of wonder. The palace would be packed with his companions.
おお、イエーイ。私が王様ですよ。おお、猫ちゃんがいる。こんばんは。
including the wise calico who'd insisted on advising him.
みんな三毛猫、助けてくれようとしていたんや。現実のルイスを。猫ちゃん。行くしか かないのか。じゃあ私が行くや。
His queen waited, holding his crown.
おう。
There was only one thing left to do.
何が起こるんや。で、看をかぶせてもらいましょうか。目を借りること。よし。王様に。
And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
ああ、なんてこったい。
My brother was really cool. I wish you could have met him.
マジかよ。よし。お、
He was so proud of being Indian. I think for him, it was a way to be something other than just a Finch.
おいと。
On the way back from Lewis's funeral, my mom told me to start packing. She waited until the day before we left to tell Edie. I'm not sure if she wanted to make it easier or harder. I wish we'd stayed. But I understand why we left. My mom ended up leaving everything behind.
まあ、急いで出て行ったと。よし。
What happened that night had been coming for a long time. Maybe it should have come sooner.
よいしょ。 OK。
But it had to
何上に。
end one way or another. All that's left now is to tell you about that last night. That whole last day, Edie just watched us pack and didn't say a word. Until supper, when she raised her glass and said,
To our final night together, and all our final nights apart.
Grandma, you know what I said about alcohol. Some of your medications are very
Edith,
specific.
I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown-ups have to argue now.
I'm sorry, you're right. We're all leaving tomorrow. Let's just enjoy our last...
I'm not leaving.
Edith, you're excused.
The power had been shut off that morning, but Edie always had plenty of candles.
おう。プレゼントはどこや。
When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance,
なんと、こ
or that Edie had a key to it.
っちに入り口が。お。ここにすべての物語が。
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house. Edith has a right to know these stories.
My children are dead because of your stories. I think it's best if Edith and I leave tonight. We'll have the nursing home send a van for you in the morning. Okay?
Dear Edith, there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one. This is about what happened on the night you were born. That night, The tide went way, way out. It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground. There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean. They called it the lowest tide in 1,000 years. God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life.
とうとう
But I never thought I'd go back to it.
あの家に行くんや。
When the fog rolled in, I lost my way.
なんと何も見えねえ。誰か。
I got turned around.
振り向かされ。
I started seeing things.
幻。ちかさん。
Things I'd forgotten had ever existed.
え
But when I saw them, they felt like old friends. That night, a lot of things came back to me.
Oh.
Or maybe I came back to them.
とうとう。よし。行きましょ
Things I can't explain, but that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it. Let go. I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car.
う。あ、
I never saw Great Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the van came to pick her up, but she was already gone. After that, we moved around a lot. We both tried to make the best of it. A few years went by. My mom didn't like to talk about it, but she started getting sick a lot. The rest happened pretty quickly. She got better for a while, and then she didn't. And then I was alone. The last Finch left alive. Until I found out about you. I'm still not sure what to tell you about all this. If we lived forever, maybe we'd have time to understand things. But as it is, I think the best we can do is try to open our eyes. And appreciate how strange and brief all of this is. This journal was supposed to be for you. But now I hope you'll never see it. I just want to meet you and tell you all these stories myself. But I guess if you're reading this now, things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all. Good luck.
あ、エジス・フィンチ。あ、子供か。 でフィンチ家の奇妙な物語はクリアですかね。まだ見てないこととかあっただろうけど、それは自分で見てもらって、実際のところどうなんでしょうな。起こったことは実際にそうなっていたのか、何かの例えなのか、わからないけど、よし。でもやっぱ気になるのは、なんか死ぬ直前というか亡くなる直前の人が人の腕にあざが出てたんだよ。あざというか斑点みたいなのが、それが呪いなんじゃないかなって思うんだけど、どうなんでしょう。実際呪いじゃなくて思い込みなのかなとも思っていたんだけど、でもやっぱそういう共通点があると実際呪いがあるのかなって思っちゃうよね。実際はどうなのかわかんないけど、よし、みんな可愛いね。手応えでね。人は、生きてればいつか亡くなってしまうからね。それもあるかもしんない。おお、ワンちゃん。そやな。もしかしてだけど、エディスが最後に見た日記には全てが書かれてたんじゃないかなと思うんだよね。日記帳にはおばあちゃんが言ってたフィンチ家の家の人の全てが詰まってるみたいな話。もしかしてフィンチ家の人のストーリーは初めから全て決まってたんじゃないかなって思うんだよ。どうなんでしょうな。亡くなることまで。バーバラさんもあれはどういうことなんでしょうな。怪物に襲われてたけど、怪物は一体どこにいたのか。家の中にいたってことでいいのかな。どうなのかわからんけど。よし。じゃあね、ウォルターはずっと隠れてたんやな。なぜみんな隠していたのか。どうなのかわかんないけど、何かしらの真実というかあったのかもね。よし。おっしゃ、そやな。ミルトンもあれやな。あれはどういうことなんでしょうな。落ちたってことでいいのかな。風に吹かれて。普通に見ればそうなんだけど、それだと隠されたものを見つけたっていうのがつながらないと思うんだよね。どうなんでしょう。隠されていたものだっけ、真実だっけ。これがエディスケと。よし。ザ・エンドと。よし。OK。ありがとうございます。おっしゃ。OK。じゃあこれでフィンチ家の奇妙な物語はおしまいですかね。よし。じゃあご視聴いただきありがとうございました。お疲れ様でした。よいしょ。終わります。